She shouldn't have had to do that. She's going through enough already with a desperately sick child at home. She's tried everything she can think of to get this thing to leave her daughter. Hot baths, cold baths, incense burning at the bedside, holding her child as she thrashes and cries out, scraping together coins to pay doctor after doctor. But nothing helps. One evening, as she's going to the well for water, she passes a man she's never seen before, a man with the clothes and accent of a Jew from Galilee, 35 miles inland from her coastal city of Tyre. A small entourage seems to be following the man. As she waits her turn for water, she asks a neighbor who that is. The neighbor tells her, his name is Jesus of Nazareth, some kind of Jewish wonder worker and healer. He's good, too. He can even raise the dead. Immediately she says, I know Jews don't usually interact with Gentiles like us, but do you think he would help my little girl? The neighbor shrugs. Apparently he's healed Gentiles before. A man with an unclean spirit in the land of the Gerasenes. Jesus cast the spirit into a herd of pigs and drove them into the lake. Go ask him. He's staying in the street just behind ours. She leaves her bucket, trots over, finds the house, and knocks on Jesus' door. He answers himself. She bows to him, showing as much respect as she can, and lets the pleading seep into her voice. Please, will he come and cast the spirit out of her daughter? Jesus' eyebrows knit together in disapproval. He says, let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. And he closes the door. She stands there for a minute, gaping in shock. Did he really just call her a dog? Then she pounds on the door again, and when Jesus opens it, she shoots back, even the dogs eat the crumbs under the children's table. He's taken aback. Finally, he says, for saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. She runs back home, bursts into her child's room, and finds her little girl sitting up, calm and in her right mind. But she shouldn't have had to do that. She shouldn't have had to remind Jesus that she is a beloved child of God, created in God's image. How dare he look down on her for being a Gentile foreigner? He's the visitor in her city. She doesn't care what excuse he makes, that he's tired, hungry, overwhelmed, he had a long walk to get here. She deserves to be treated with respect and compassion. And she doesn't get it from Jesus. There's a lot of difficult stuff in the Bible. Confusing passages, teachings that seem impossible to follow, actions attributed to God that are uncomfortable or baffling. But to me, this story of Jesus and the Syrophoenician woman is the most difficult of all, because it shows Jesus acting small-minded, small-hearted, without any of the compassion he usually shows to people who are suffering. You can say no to someone kindly and gently. We do that all the time. There's absolutely no need for insults. No one should have to remind the Son of God to treat them with basic human courtesy. Christianity teaches that Jesus was both fully human and fully divine. He was like us in every way, but without sin. 99% of the time, I fully agree with that. But this episode calls that doctrine into question for me. I think it's possible that Jesus did sin in calling this poor, distressed woman a dog. I asked the Wednesday Bible study group why Mark included this story in his gospel. He didn't have to. Matthew also has it, but Luke leaves it out. The group had some really interesting answers. That it makes Jesus more believable to hear that he had some flaws. to show us that our persistence can change God's mind, that we can see ourselves better in a Savior who is less than perfect. The historian in me thinks that possibly this episode was well known enough that Mark couldn't leave it out. So many people had heard about it that Mark needed to include it, or else his gospel would never be taken seriously as a reliable account. When we step back and look at the whole of Mark's gospel, we notice that Jesus meeting the Syrophoenician woman is a turning point in the story. Before this, Jesus has had a little contact with Gentiles, but his ministry has really been to his fellow Jews. After this, Jesus is much more open to Gentiles. The next place he goes from Tyre is Sidon, then the Decapolis, both Gentile regions. In the Decapolis, he heals a man who's deaf, and he feeds a Gentile crowd of 7,000 people with 7 loaves of bread and a few small fish. Jesus changes after this. His mind and his heart open up again. He's back to compassion for those who suffer and justice for those who are oppressed. He's once again the Savior he's supposed to be. A promise of baptism is that we are more than the worst moments of our lives. We may forget that when we're in the midst of suffering or shame, but God doesn't. Sometimes the worst moments happen to us. Sometimes they are choices or actions we make. Those things are real, and we can't erase them, and they do not define us in God's eyes. To God, we are God's beloved and precious children, capable of great sin and also of great goodness. We're all stumbling through this life, trying to do the best we can with what we have at the time. All of us, even Jesus. God has compassion for us in our weakness, and God does not leave us to struggle through on our own. God works in us and through us to form us into the people God knows we can be. So it is with us, so it is with Jesus. He can't erase those hurtful words he said to the Syrophoenician woman. He can't go back and treat her differently this time, do it all over again with respect and compassion. But Jesus has been baptized, as we were. The worst thing he has done does not define him in God's eyes. God sees him as God's beloved and precious child, capable of great harm and also of great goodness. Jesus can change and become the kind of person who doesn't insult others, and he does. From this point on, he treats Gentiles with respect, compassion, and hospitality. Somehow I doubt that was much comfort to the Syrophoenician woman. Yes, Jesus did eventually heal her daughter, but she shouldn't have had to remind him to treat her like a human being. I wonder whether she became a disciple of Jesus after this. I kind of doubt it. An insult like that is hard to overcome. It's hard to imagine her trusting Jesus or even wanting to be near him. But the promise of baptism embraces the Syrophoenician woman too. The worst moment of her life doesn't define her in God's eyes. God sees her as she truly is, as Glenn Phillips puts it, before the tears, beneath the scars. She is God's beloved and precious child, capable of great sin and also of great goodness. She probably knows that about herself. That's why she made that clever comeback to Jesus. Perhaps that's why Mark included this story in his gospel, to remind us all that we are more than our worst moments in God's eyes. That's a promise of baptism. Those worst moments have consequences. When something terrible has happened to us, we have some grieving and healing to do. When we have done something terrible, we have to make amends, try to repair what we have broken, and do the hard work of change. But those things don't define who we are, because we are beloved, precious children of God. We are capable of great sin and also of great goodness. That's who God knows us to be.